Hello and welcome to Transcending Ascension today as we continue our journey live into the Gospel of Thomas. And we'll pick up almost where we left off yesterday. And let's get started. So 72, a person said to him, "Tell my brother to divide my father's possessions with me." He said to the person, "Mister, who made me a divider?" He turned to his disciples and said to them, "I'm not a divider, am I?" Now, that right there is, let's give you a screen of that. So, tell my brothers to divide my possessions. And he says he's not a divider, which is funny because there's other sections in the Bible, and it's mentioned in the few of the Gospels that he does say he's going to come in and divide up houses. So maybe he means he's not a divider of stuff, which means that the stuff is not part of awakening, which we already know. So we can leave that there. If that's all you're seeing, that's all I'm seeing. It's more division talk, which he mentions a lot, which I'm sure deep esoteric symbolism in that dividing, the polarities, dividing. He's not a divider. What's that mean? He's the center, middle pillar, Christ consciousness alignment. That is the Christ. That is the constant awakening force in our life. And the dualities here, when we see the either sides, are very relevant, especially in an awakening journey, and why we always want to hold to that middle pillar, and why it's always what I mainly focus on in teachings, even though we can see esoteric symbolism within this in the mentioning of the divider. And you see the divider discussed a lot under different circumstances within the Bible, but he is the middle pillar, right? Now, in our awakening, these polarities are going to hit us because of the law of rhythm as well. So we are also divided between two, but then there's the law of rhythm that keeps us bouncing between those two. So we can use this in our awakening journey to give us more fuel to move forward in a faster manner. This is why everything that's happening now with the astrological chaos that's going on, that's pumping down everything that's happening right now. Like, for example, the conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus coming up on April 18th is going to drive things wild. Many revolutions have happened during this very conjunction when the two meet, and Jupiter is the more powerful force as the faster moving planet, making it the more predominant force in what's going to happen here. And it is pure power. But then Uranus is that troublesome awakening energy that is new to us. All the new planets that we see past Saturn are why we are more alive, more aware, and more relevant to today than it seems in the past. Like in the past, we think like, oh, they're not as smart as us. Well, when we look at astrology, you see that the more this goes into that perception of I am God, because the astrological stars are not a coincidence. They match our psyche on some divine cosmic reason, some plane that we hold all the dimensions within us. So when we look at astrology and the fact that we see these new planets, they are what have added into us that revolutionary energy. Like the French Revolution was shortly after they had discovered new planetary bodies. Like, so Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus are all brand new. And now they have two other littler planets that kind of go together. They call them dwarf planets, but that's still going to affect us within our solar system. One of them is, I think, Chiron, and the other one is something else. And I could be mixing that up because I'm not an astrologer. But it is vital that you embody the overall understanding of astrology within your own cosmic makeup of how your brain works in this society, because that's how you awaken. Like all these things that we construct together into our own matrix of understanding is what's going to cause us to illuminate and take those steps forward. So, for example, when we're talking law of rhythm and how we can utilize that in our awakening, we look at yesterday. And yesterday, because I had just pieced together a bunch of things that were happening in the world with what's coming up on April 18th, and I was feeling very, oh no, which I don't ever do. I'm very positive. But yesterday I got a little, oh no, is something actually like, oh my God, do we need to be moving faster? Do we have to do something? But it like caused an illumination to go up and forward today. That's still being true. That's still being a very relevant factor, that we have that revolutionary energy coming. It has caused wars basically every time, I think, in the past. I mean, don't quote me on that, but since we've been seeing it, because that's just the thing. These planets don't really start to affect us until we know they are there. Think about that. That's something that can cause cognitive dissonance when you first learn it. And you can actually never even properly comprehend or understand that, besides seeing it in that fourth dimensional thinking realm, where we see things and we can see it in like psychedelic trips or deep meditational places, of how we and astrology match together and then control each other. So the fact that we see these planets and then they start to affect our psyche, the same thing's going to happen when we reach new realizations. And that is what's going to keep happening in the next year and two, but mostly this year is going to be tons and tons and tons of revelations coming to us, new information we didn't know about. And even in our own journeys, when, for like, if you're like me and you are constantly researching books of the past, but then you, like, I posted it today on Twitter, a quote I was reading today in one of Rudolf Steiner's books, and it just like, whoa, that if you know, and it's the whole Santa Claus thing, if you know and believe that those dimensions are there, then they will make themselves seen to you. Then you will know and get to live them as real. And that's just blows your mind, because it's one of those things I personally have seen as a lived truth. The more I just had to allow my analytical brain to accept metaphysical concepts, the more their reality became just that, a reality in my life. And I began to actually see things more, and working on actually hearing things. Like, I can internal mind's eye hear things like as my own thoughts, or seeing things. And we're all growing in these abilities to see and feel and perceive more, but it's on us first to believe it, to start to see it. So like those astrologers that made the better telescopes to see the planets that are further out, and as soon as we discovered them, now our brains are working at that higher level, and we are more, we do think more, we are accomplishing more. It's why we have electricity and everything that has come in those points since discovering that there is more planets out there. So not just in astrology, we can also use this when comprehending dimensions and all the different layers that different religions have talked about. And they all could have been correct in their own way, because of the way dimensions work. They are vast. And this is what we use to make our physical reality, believe it or not. But this is where it comes from. This is where they say imagination makes reality. Yes, it does. But imagination, that fourth dimensional realm, exceeds very far, to the point where we're talking here that possibly the cosmos are created by us. And if you know the anthropic principle, this plays in nicely with that us and God actually exist at the same time, and we are making each other. That's one of those cognitive dissonant, mind-blowing facts that when you learn about all the esoteric stuff within it, it reads as a persistent truth that it could actually exist no other way. It's how all the dimensions, the layers, the laws of the hermetics, how it all comes into play together to make a comprehensible sense in how we function in reality. And that is the truth of it. And it can seem mind-blowing, but that's why meditation helps you integrate in this knowledge. Because when you read esoteric information and learn about astrology and all the different things we are learning that have always actually existed within our world, like things like tarot even can open layers inside your brain. The I Ching opens layers inside your brain. And the more you open and believe those layers, the more your actual life is going to show that, from the behavior of your children improving, from your outer lifestyle improving. These are the things that just come naturally. So So we're talking a new layer here. No longer do we go into things as I'm here to manifest. I'm gonna put my mind to it and manifest what we want. Neville, Goddard way. Yes, that is accurate, and I will quote him often, but it's a rudimentary looking at it, just as the old gospels are now starting to seem rudimentary as we read through our Gospel of Thomas. It's still accurate, but there is so much for us to pull out of it. And we talked yesterday how he even says that he's not teaching all the facts, that he is only teaching what he thinks their brains will comprehend. So he's saying right there, they're not ready yet. And Rudolf Steiner is once, and Carl Jung have both been quoted as saying similar lines along that they aren't teaching for today. They're teaching for the future. Their people are coming. They knew they were not there yet today, but that they were coming. And same with Manly P. Hall. I don't know if he actually said that, but he is of that branch of teachers that we had in our close history, a lot closer than Jesus himself. I'm not saying they're at the same level that Jesus got to. That's if we're to believe the huge miracle healings, if that actually happened, or perhaps it was just our regular everyday magic that is mind-boggling. Like when you fully get into this and you start to see it happening, it's not like a poof of magic smoke in the Hollywoodism of magic, but it is magic nonetheless. And that's one of the things I almost like about Harry Potter. It does show actual magic, but at the same time, it created an entire world that functioned more or less without even using magic, because the whole entire way the realm worked, because if you notice, they were in a different realm. It was all magic. Now I'm going to branch here and hope that, like, hypothetically, if this be true, we could branch over our physical reality slowly but surely, but it would be great if we could speed that up to get to a place where we are seeing more lived magic. And like I said, I'm seeing colors, I'm seeing things kind of shift, but let's get to a point, like they say that the body can heal itself. So miracle healings, that's already happening. What else can we do? Some people say that we should be able to levitate, and that people have levitated in meditation in the past. Okay, great. What else can we do? We know for a fact we can control other people's minds when you get into esotericism. Should you do that? No, because it will occur very serious karma. But how can we use it in a positive way? Well, by making spiritual centers. That's what I hope to do physically in the real world, and bring us together in like a meditation center with crystals and chanting and sound healing, and not only raise the vibration. Churches were built on ley lines, the majority of them, because they knew they were energetic vessels. They would take over old pagan temples because the pagans knew this and build up churches. So they're literally held on more powerful energy lines of the earth. And this is one of the things Matthias de Stefano does, is he used to travel around the earth and wake up the kundalini lines of the earth. The same can be done on the magic ley lines of the earth. So if we build spiritual centers and then meditate and sound heal, we can literally start changing the collective mindset faster to higher vibrations. These are just things that we can do in our current world to up the level of magic that we are seeing in lived reality. Because if we keep turning up the volume of the pressure points of the magic level, just like we've been seeing in the last 4 years, since people like en masse started waking up, as somebody that was pre-awakened before this, we got a frontline view of how things actually are a little more magic now. Things actually are like you manifest your thoughts much faster. Everything, the volume is turned up now on our abilities. So where do we take this and where do we learn? And they didn't want to teach us occult knowledge in the past because of karma, or gave away the ending, not because of karma, but because of the evil we might do, right? Because we could take that power and do evil, and there is people still today doing that evil, but they are okay with the negative consequences. Those true evil people have chosen service to self and want that evil outcome in the end. Their soul has accepted the long road for that evil. Well, the average person, the majority of our general population, including soul level, are not going to want to live out those negative karma consequences, and they're not going to give it their all to be that. I think it's in the 5%, like not. So you have to be 95% evil to succeed at being evil, where to be good, you only have to be around 51% good to succeed at being good. And in that middle ground, we're talking massive amounts of karma. And one thing I've noticed personally, and I've heard it seeing it in the playing fields of life and hearing it from people in my life, that the consequences for karma are more dire and more serious and more immediate. So you are being punished for what you do early on. The whole concept of hell as a lived reality here on earth. And hell is a place that you put yourself into when you occur negative karma. So doing any kind of occultism or rituals for even selfish manifestations are evil. So even if you're like, oh, I'm not going to hurt anyone, but this is why witchcraft is evil, but I'm going to do a spell to get me a new car. You don't know what that new car is going to cost you. You don't know. Like that could kill an uncle. That could, your current car could crash. Like there is so many things that are going to happen. So when we are even manifesting material wealth, we need to be very careful. This is why, going back to the original point here of just up leveling our magic ability, our ability to just be a pure Christ-centered being within alignment. You don't have to call it Christ if that's a triggering word. That actually came from the original word Christos, which I think meant sacred oil, which is that oil that comes up our spine once a month when the moon is in our sun sign. When the moon is in our sun sign, our Christos oil seed comes down into our spine. And if we keep ourselves perfectly pure within a 3-day period, we get an extra helping of Christ and that Christos oil. And that's where that word Christ comes from, because that's within our Christ alignment. So Jesus, the Christ, is just somebody embodying that energy. And it doesn't matter if you believe he's a real person or not. The information that was put down is still helpful. Though as we go through, we are finding it is more unpackable and less digestible than I'm sure it was in the past. And this is why we are very lucky and very grateful to have people like Rudolf Steiner that I mentioned today talks out of a Christ light. When he talks about stuff, so did Neville Goddard, they talk about things from a Christ light, from that Christ perspective. Even where I got my metaphysical degree, they taught everything out of the Christ light, out of the Bible, though they did match it often to esoteric ideas and Eastern philosophies, because usually I will talk Buddhism because I think Jesus was a Buddhist, but Buddhism was before Jesus. Like Buddha was about 500 years before Jesus himself. So Jesus is still that person taking it that level further. Like today, we have new people emerging like the alchemist and Matthias de Stefano, though he gets it from his own brain, but they're taking those lessons that step further. There's some channelers. Bashar does a good job. But mostly we're still actually, for trusted information, diving back into Carl Jung. Read the Red Book if you really want to read his esoteric material. I think it reads like a Bible, the way he writes it in such beautiful poetry. All his work is very helpful because healing the mind, which projects our reality, is going to help us esoterically and magically. So he was always writing from, and anima is yin yang. I wish he had just called it yin yang. And he always or often will mention that it is the yin yang, the masculine, feminine. It just would have helped if he had kept it coherent. Oh, you are very welcome. And then we had Manly P. Hall. He didn't always keep things in a Christ light, but he does mention Christ frequently. And then Rudolf Steiner, of course, kept things in a Christ light. So we have that place there of alignment, which is where we're always going to want to dive back into. It is amazing to learn esoteric topics. It is amazing to find yourself in the law of rhythm, like I was saying how I did yesterday. But when we are knowingly in the law of rhythm and we are knowingly knowing that we're going to go for bumps and bruises on our spiritual path, we actually want the bumps. And I say frequently, like, I will look for triggers and I allow arguing. You can ask her. I allow discussion because I'm always open to where I could be wrong. Because when we find those places, and even yesterday, I don't think I'm wrong, like getting upset about politics and how we really need to do something. That's true. But what can we do about it? We just still have to come into that place of up-leveling our consciousness, unless we happen to be a lawyer or somebody in a place that can step into politics. Like we have RFK in America, which we'll hope, because again, with politics, who can we really trust? And given the way the system is, That's never a system where we're going to find peace. And this is what I was getting into yesterday. It's not about who you vote for. It's about finding a system that's going to work. And the whole system, I think, needs to run on a zodiac system, which a lot of people find very silly because they don't understand astrology. But as we talked about in the beginning, we don't want to shake the camera though, sweetie. Remember, we had one rule, and that was don't shake the camera. We find ourselves with astrology matching how our consciousness works. And whether or not we have a 13th zodiac, I also think would change the way that we perceive reality. But we would, as a collective, need to accept that in. Because as a collective, you can see that astrology works regardless of the fact that scientifically, those astrological signs actually don't line up anymore. They haven't lined up in a long time because every year they slip a little more. But if you see in your psyche, you still match those zodiac astrological signs. And then I'm a prime example of the new one, which I always say wrong. It's not Ophelia. It's something like that. Ophelia is Ophelia. And it's within the end of December range where that 13th zodiac sign is supposed to actually fall. And I embody both those concepts, that of an actual fiery Sagittarius, but that of an actual Ophelius, I'm saying it wrong, 13th zodiac, which is more, sounds a lot like an empath style person. And that's even within my star chart. And I recommend you do human design if you haven't done it yet. Human design is astrology, but also Kabbalah, the Vedas, and the I Ching or the I Ching, whatever you want to call it, all vital things to dive into. And we were talking resources earlier to keep yourself on Christ alignment. Now, the tarot is great and been used for a long time, but I have found stability, that Christ-centered stability inside of the I Ching. So it's literally spelled I-Ching, the book of changes. And Carl Jung actually signs off on it. And the main one I will use, to read out your hexagrams is his version. Now he's not, it's William something H. I think he's a German, so it's a translated copy. They were friends though, and he himself wrote the book, but Carl Jung gave it validity. He gave it examples. He even cast his own before, I think, writing his section, and it just matched up. So he showed us in live action how it works. And we've seen that the tarot works and it's great. We're not besmirching it, but if we're looking for something that's actually going to find us stability, because in the spiritual world, which is fantastic, we do see, and we're always like, you're not grounded. You're not grounded. It's a little bit true. And even I find myself in that place sometimes, but that's okay, because when we get ungrounded, it's often, imagine like you're in a storm and you're a tornado. You're picking up a bunch of things, which is great, like a bunch of information, which can sometimes overload us and fry the circuits. Cognitive dissonance is real. But when we come back into our Christ-centered alignment, we take that information that we picked up on our tornado and we integrate it. This is also what meditation will do for us. It will integrate that information into our lived experience. So now we're taking that information inside the self and embodying it and living our life, becoming a better mom, becoming a better whatever you are in the actual real world. Because researching and learning esotericism is fantastic. But this is why I feel like teachers get stuck on manifest your car, manifest money, because sure, you could use it for that. And I did for a tiny bit. We all do when we first get into it. But you see very quickly, if you have your eyes open, that it's going to generate negative karma quite quickly. This is why we were saying earlier, it's actually not easy to be evil. So we no longer need to fear, which was probably negative propaganda, that using esotericism for evil is going to hurt the world. It's only going to hurt the world if enough people's souls decided to go be evil, because your soul itself needs to decide to be evil for that to have any very dire maniacal consequences, like it does with a certain 1% that we don't even know their true names. Somebody was saying yesterday about the Rothschilds, and it's like, yes, except we know their name. We don't know the name of the true people that have dark, dark, dark souls. And I'm not saying the Rothschilds don't. I'm sure they probably do. And the actual percentage of those people that have chosen to live a dark soul life, which maxes out if stories be told, but a lot of information validates this, that you cannot go past darkness, past the fifth dimension. So you max out in fifth dimension and you don't get to live any further. Where from then on, it's all good. This is why we can always hold faith and truth and the light and then the love, which sounds cheesy, but God is good. and then there's way more infinite existence that lives only as good. The negative had to come into existence for physical reality to be a thing, but then it also has its corresponding dimensional roles to play. So meaning there is tons of fourth and fifth dimensional worlds that are not so many fifth, but tons of fourth that are dark, that are very, very dark, you don't want to mess with. And then there is a few fifth, which is semi-physical, more etheric, if truth be told, realms, which I don't really like to think about, like perhaps the actual hell dimensions that may or may not exist, which isn't the biblical way of saying everybody that did anything slightly wrong that the church didn't agree with, you're all good. No, those are going to be where those fifth dimensional souls might like and want to live for a while. They probably enjoy it. If you ever watched the show Has Been Hotel, which I didn't watch with my daughter, you will see that it actually was a beautiful story showing that how there's people in hell that want to be redeemed. And I've always felt that as a truth myself, and literally wrote a fictional tale myself in high school, but about the fact that hell is a very real and living embodied place, which we can see in this world if you do negative esoteric manifesting techniques, which is anything of any kind of a selfish degree. The only way you have non-karmic magic is pure white magic. So like we were saying earlier, spiritual centers and sound healing, which is just raising that vibration up. It's naturally going to take care of your money needs. And Christ often says that, like, if you need food or anything, it's going to happen because you will divinely be taken care of. In fact, one of the goals right now with creating this future and the separation we just had to go to was to create more technology so that if we are less burdened by being human and constantly needing to sip water like I am, or us constantly needing coffee like we do, even though we've tried many times to get off it because we don't want to be addicted to anything, or sugar, because that clearly is sugar in it as well. But these are all things that alleviate the suffering. So what one of the big pushes was to separate us from our soul, because a lot of the time if we're so in our soul like monks, we don't want to do anything. We're fine to just sit there all day and go but if we were to alleviate the suffering of the body, so even things like fast food restaurants are actually to our benefit, and we have improved as a physical world even since having fast food restaurants, because it's alleviating the burden of the body so that we can get to food faster. Once upon a time, we were not able to advance very far because we had to spend all day hunting and gathering and getting food and surviving and living and making clothes and all the thing it takes to survive. But now, because we have such easier ways of surviving so many things, like I live in Canada and it gets very, very, very cold, I can just go get, even though it's terrible EMFs and I don't wear it for long, but I have sweetie, we're shaking the camera. We're shaking the camera. I have electrical vests. I have an electrical blanket. I haven't used them, but I even have electrical gloves and socks my husband got me for Christmas. So I can stay warm and survive thanks to that technology very easily. Where not too long ago, people were freezing to death. There's just such a remarkable difference there. So we are allowed this luxury of reading esoteric books all day long and listening to them on audiobooks. If we don't have the time to sit and read because we have to clean the house, we can just listen to them. My audiobook subscription is my favorite thing in the world, I think, because I'm just able to power through book after book after book after book, but still clean the house and take care of the children while downloading endless information. And then we're afforded the luxury of meditating so that we can integrate that information into ourselves. And then I'm afforded the luxury of coming on here and being able to share that information, which actually the entire reason I started it now back in 2020 was to help me integrate the information better, because I read that you cannot learn the information unless you are teaching the information. And I found that to be true, because in my learning, I used to hit blocks where the cognitive dissonance would stop me from properly learning the information. And then also taking care of your body and yourself will also help you integrate better. But by teaching, that was one of the biggest things that opened up my block. So if you have any inclinations to teach, although some people say I'm so natural on camera and I was born with it. So like, this is just normal for me. So if you're not one of those people that can just talk to people and not care about being judged or whatever the situation might be, I'm actually lucky that way, because I don't have to overcome anything there. I've never been one of those people. But if you are, then you could go on Twitter and just write your thoughts. Or some people, I find a lot of people just use Instagram and just post a meme, but find a way to teach your teachings, whatever your specific little plug is into this world. Everybody has their own little insights. Oh, sorry, sweetie. But like some people post health information, which I'm super into health, but I've never felt, I tried to do a couple episodes where I taught people about health things because I'm super into it, but it's like, that's not where my passion is. And even early on, I even tried teaching like the odd lesson about crystals or something. And all those episodes are now locked and gone because that was not my space. My space, I found, as going through, is dimensions, but Christ consciousness. I teach dimensions, fourth dimensional thinking, obviously ascension and enlightenment, but I teach the way I'm navigating my way through it. Everybody has their own way and their own blocks, because don't forget, we've done this before. Maybe you did the esoteric journey and you did the embodying of the soul dimensional self and raising through the karmic layer blocks that exist so your soul can actually be, like, if we think that Masonic levels and they go all the way up to 33, but that's actually like they're pulling that, just like all those religions kind of pull from a place of truth. But we do rise up. Our consciousness does rise, not in a superior way, because at the bottom you are more dense and more concentrated and possibly better in the physical world. But as you rise up, you now become more etheric and more able to hold more thoughts, because the mind, the thoughts, is moving into different dimensions of space. Like, it's outside of us. And like we talked yesterday, all of the quantum field is the Akashic records, is the ether. They are the same thing. So we rise into that space and we expand into it. But perhaps your role is the physical. Maybe you're an earth sign, so you are meant to farm. Like there's Rudolf Steiner has a course that I was trying to link to today, but I couldn't get a link. But he has a whole course he did on bio gardening, like farming, but using the moon and the astrology to properly farm, and how there's no need for pesticides and anything of the like, because the insects will not eat the plant if it is grown inside its proper astrological sign, in its proper place, in its proper order, facing the proper way. Just like we know with rituals, that if you do a ritual facing the north, you do it for this. Like I used to know back in my Wiccan days, that's information I've let drop, but depending on north, south, east, and west, the direction you're facing, it matters when you're doing a ritual, and it matters when you're growing food. And simple things like adding copper wiring, which I plan to do this year to your gardening, will add more electromagnetism into your gardening. And here I am now, I'm teaching your gardening lesson, but I'm saying there's different spaces that you could find to teach. And that is such a fascinating world. I wish other people that had that gardening bug, which I don't have, but I have a passion for the earth. The earth itself is but I could just hug her all day. Like if I'm actually out there gardening, I love planting the seeds. But beyond that, I'm like, okay, you do it, God. I'm done. But there's other people I know that love going out into their garden every day and weeding and being there with the garden all day long. And that's just not my avenue. My avenue is I could probably sit here and talk to you all day long about Christ. And even her, I'm lecturing her. She's a Gemini, so she loves to talk. And she's always like, talk to me, mommy. She gets to tricks me in when it's bedtime. She's like, no, tell me my things, because she knows I can just get going and about this stuff. Yeah, right. Mommy can talk endlessly about the universe and Christ consciousness and all those things. But that's my avenue. And also my children are my avenue. And this is why I used to think I should work with children in the real world. But honestly, one of the things I'm also deciding is I'm not meant to work in the real world unless I get the money together one day for my spiritual center, because churches are expensive to buy. And then obviously if I could, I would build a pure spiritual center with, like, we're talking this is why we need engineers, and we don't want to jangle the camera, remember? No. Engineers and architects to actually design us up. Like we were saying yesterday about how there used to be spiritual buildings, and there still is in Europe, but there used to be in America, where they're built properly. And you see it sometimes a little bit in churches, like when they have the point on top, that's pulling down more energy, or in houses that have the circles. This is my dream house with those circly, they look like witch tunnels, and they go up, and you imagine them with a spiral staircase. And then at the top, there's usually a point, and then off it, even a metal point that goes even higher, that they used to say were lightning rods. Those are to pull down energy. So you were constantly having a cosmic flow inside the house of more energy. And when I moved in, there's an old satellite on top of the house right there. right at the top of the point, that I used to think of as negative because possibly it's pulling in more EMFs and I'm super against EMFs. But now I'm trying to think of it, maybe I'll metaphysically change it or create it into that, but that it's one of those pulling in more cosmic energy down onto the house, because that's just the kind of things that we can grow and build into. That's the kind of things that people like them know. And they don't want us to be pulling in more cosmic energy. They don't want us to be meeting together and learning together and growing together, because we enhance in spiritual metaphysical powers. We enhance our growth. This is why, like, the whole Christ stage, and why we're going through the Gospels, although we're not reading much of it today because we're on a good flow here. Like, that's what happened yesterday with being at the bottom. It's today I woke up with new clarity of putting it all together and how we're going to be all right at the end of the day. And this is why the Buddhists want us to attach and be okay with our death, which I'm into and I study, and I've done a lot of the rituals, which a lot of people don't get the opportunity to do. I've been given that chance, and it does bring you closer, and you do enlighten more the more that you accept death as a reality. But it doesn't change the fact that we don't want to die. And I want to see magic in this realm before I die. But we're supposed to have faith that, like, even if it doesn't happen this life, it's going to be in the next, because we're always going to be growing. And this is true. And we can hold to that. But that's not going to stop me from pushing for it to be more magical today, like they were doing back in the Gospels. But they got stopped. That whole Catholic council in, I think it's the Council of Nicaea, where Emperor Constantine and blah, 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 but they boxed it all into the Catholicism, stealing pagan rituals left, right, and center, and then killing them so they couldn't tell. That's probably why they were killed. Not because they were evil pagans, because they'll tell people this is their rituals, not ours, like all their saints and all the symbols. Look through it. It's just bonkers. And that's why it's just bonkers. And there's still a driving power force today within the Vatican. So that's something that we need to be dealing with as well. But side note for us, like our esotericism, occultism, we're unboxing that. Like, a cult is hidden. No longer is it hidden. We are bringing it forth. And we can trust ourselves to know that we're going to utilize this correctly. Because if we don't, we'll be severely smited for it. That is no joke. That is no joke. Even with her, and I don't do it to be mean, but sometimes if she's having a tantrum, so she'll start screaming and yelling, but then she'll stub her toe, or then she'll trip and fall. And I'll be like, I'm sorry that happened, but you were just smited. And it's like, even if you're a child, you're going to build up that negative energy of having like a tantrum, and little kids have tantrums, but it doesn't save them. They are not saved from their own smiting. Like, not even with me getting her in trouble, her own smiting comes from it. So this is the kind of thing that if you can watch it live out in your child, know that you as an adult would be nothing but more responsible. You know how they say children get reasoning when they're 7? You can actually, and I've witnessed it, 'cause she's 7, she's almost 8. We've witnessed it on an actual person to person level, that she seems to be more responsible for her own karma. We're checking the camera. Her own karma, and that's just living out in her own life. But likewise, she is learning lessons faster. Like, she fell the other day and her foot is badly torn up, but she was using her big girl scooter, because she has 2 different scooters. So she was growing in her learning, and she even grew in her, like, she didn't cry at all other than the natural tears, because we thought natural sadness is fine. But when we bring it to a screaming tantrum of everybody look at me and feel bad for me, I've hurt myself, that's where we're going to accrue negative karma. So that balance even exists within us as humans. Like, when bad things happen, we need to be truthful within ourselves and only allow what is honorable to our body. So I'm using this example a lot because, I mean, it's a powerful example, but my mother died a few months ago, and that right there, wow, but I know everything I know. So I allowed myself a couple weeks of, oh God, boo-hoo, because she was 59. That's very sad. But we know that if we stay in that boohoo place too long, we're going to start creating negative karma. We are not going to help our life. We could detriment our life. I used to watch the show back in my batter days, 600-Pound Life. And I even used to like to eat when they were eating. Like, it was a weird fetish. But a lot of them started their sad stories from, my mother died. My mother died. And then next thing you know, they have 10 cats and they got over 600 pounds. That's what the show's about. And I kept seeing that in my head. It was almost like it was for that moment, because just sure enough, okay, I'm going to throw in a commercial, but sure enough, I started eating tons and tons and tons of junk food. And I saw it. I'm like, wow, because that's my thing. I jump into sugar now as a coping mechanism when moments like that occur. But we do have to honor the body and honor the self and honor those human experiences and say, yes, that happened. Yes, that is traumatizingly sad, but we are progressing beings and we are in a unique position that I feel like they were back in the days of Jesus, where the energies are here for us now to evolve through this faster. So I even allowed myself that honor of being like, okay, Diana, you know tons of stuff. You know the energies are pumping. You know you actually have the unique opportunity to heal and grow through this much faster. And I think I am. I think I did. And I think, okay, because I prepared for this moment and about that crystal oil we were talking.
In the brain, in the cranium, there is the cerebrum. And in the cerebrum, and in particular the claustrum, the claustrum is sitting right there in the middle of the head, virtually. From the claustrum, there is a secretion, brain fluid. And this fluid is an oil. And in ancient times, this fluid, in Greek, it's called Christos. It's called the Christ. It's this beautiful fluid which comes from the cerebrum and pours down the spinal cord. It goes down the spinal cord and it reaches the sacral plexus, right next door to the sacrum, which are the 5 second bottommost fused vertebrae bones at the bottom of the spinal column. The bottommost portion of the spinal column is called the coccyx. Then just above that is the sacrum, 5 fused bones. So the sacral plexus is connected to the sacrum. And the fluid which comes from the cerebrum pours down the spinal cord and comes to the bottommost part of the spinal cord. Now, the claustrum is otherwise known as the holy claustrum, simply because of this beautiful oil, this Christos, that is produced and secreted. You see, the word secret comes from secretion.
Okay, and we're back from our commercial. That was our first complete experience of it, which I prepared because I plan to do the show all summer, and usually I do the show when they're in school. So I wanted to practice and prepare for that, and I think it worked nicely. So we're back, and let's just go back and jump back into our next quote. 73, Jesus said the crop is huge, but the workers are few. So beg the harvest boss to dispatch workers to the field. So beg the harvest boss to dispatch workers to the field. See, this is one of those things. This is what we were talking about, where we need to pull it. This is why the church makes me so sad. This is why Christians can make me so sad, because they will try to pull stuff out of the Bible that, like, that doesn't mean that. Because back then, there's even things, Hermes thrice Trismegistus the thrice, like they call him thrice, and then that's where they came and pulled out that he's Thoth because he's thrice existed. And I have credible sources saying that he has been tons of people, possibly even Jesus himself. But that thrice that he was called was an olden day slang of saying awesome. So they were just trying to say, like, he's so cool, Hermes the amazing, Hermes the this, Hermes the thrice, because they even saw, like, I'm assuming 3 as that powerhouse even then, like that holy trinity. So it's calling him thrice was a complimentary name to call him. So that's an example of us taking literal meaning out of a word from back then that just simply does not mean that anymore. And now we're kind of making stuff up. And then you could get really poetic about it, because sometimes we can do that with poetry because we aren't real and time and space does not exist at the same time. So they could all be real at the same time. But really, that can get really muddled up here. And we could take things from things that are not as profound as they should be. And as we've been going through these gospels, we have found things that are like, wow, powerhouse. But then we find things that are like this. And we're talking about crops. And I could guaranteed probably read this and be like, you know what, I see this magical saying here about the huge crops in the fields. Or we could just move on and hunt for gold. And that's what I do as somebody who is of the newer generation of ADHD, which I feel like everybody magical has that. Let's go. I just call it hungry. I am hungry. Or what they say, thirsty for the Lord. So 74, he said, Lord, there are many around the drinking trough, but there is nothing in the well. Yeah, that's wow. Okay, we've just been cosmically synchronized for what I've just said. So there is lots of people that are thirsty, and he's literally saying there is nothing in the well. There is, wow. We just had a live synchronicity there, people. There is nothing in the well. So yes, do not suck something out. Like, so if anybody's a Christian, or if you know a Christian, like, this is one of the things that they need to get through their heads is sometimes there's profound things in the Bible, right? These are the gospels that are left out, but they both are the same, written very similar. They have great things, and then they have things that are not great. So let's leave it if it no longer is culturally relevant and move forward to what is. And we just got divine permission right there. It is time to move on from old teachings that are not at our level anymore and move on to teachings that are. Like Rudolf Steiner is above our level. Try to read him and you'll see you need to get smarter to understand it, not dumb yourself down. Because a lot of the times with the Gospels, it feels like we're dumbing ourselves down to see what they possibly meant to understand it. Or we could raise our consciousness up with people like Rudolf Steiner and Carl Jung and Manly P. Hall, all people I've named because I find them above me, obviously. And I'm not saying I'm above Jesus, but their writing style and the way we've come in the last 2,000 years, we talk with way more words, for one thing. We are able to properly articulate what we mean. And I find in the early 1900s, during these writers, they actually used more words than we do now. They were more wordy. We've actually slowed down on the dialogue, because when I understand people when I read them now, like when I read Matthias de Stefano's stuff, I understand everything I'm reading because he talks like I talk, and we're talking the same, and we actually use less words. They use way more fancier words back then, but I'm finding that it has always been expanding my consciousness. Just from the moments when I started reading them a long time ago, I barely understood them, to now I fly through their books, and it's just like, wow. If I'm actually able to sit and read it, it takes a lot longer to actually, but when you actually can sit and read it, you pull in way more versus listening with an audiobook. But also both great tools we should be using to pull in information, because the downloads that are out there right now are endless. The amount of information you can comprehend is endless, and you open up more space for that understanding when you find your dark moments, like I did yesterday. Like we said, when you hit that rock bottom, and just in a thought process, like it was just in a, are we actually doomed way? And still not even saying we're not, but coming to a place where I found peace with that opens up space for more to come in and more come in. And then not just the more information coming in, but also taking the information you're learning and dancing with it together and having it mean more. Like it opens up and it means more than it used to. Like what I read earlier today about Rudolf Steiner, and how if you see and you trust that those realms exist, you will actually get to see them as existing. And it's like, I knew this, but then you read this stuff, and you read this stuff from multiple different teachers, and it just opens and gets bigger and gets bigger and gets bigger. And even Jesus himself is usually pretty helpful. But it's funny that we're hitting stinkers today. I mean, unless I'm wrong, tell me if you're seeing something profound here. 75, Jesus said, there are many standing at the door, but those who are alone will enter the bridal suite. And this is right there. I can see that. And I love when he hits those points. So standing alone never means that you have to be alone, but it does mean that you need to stand in your true power. One being a sheeple, which funny, Carl Jung actually says we should not call them sheeple, and that's insulting, because every sheep is also a person that could be awakened. Then I have an episode before I start doing the lives of there is no NPCs. There is no non-player characters. Everybody can awaken. And those of us that are awakening should be grateful that we've either come far enough in our soul journey and we aligned the astrological stars for this. When I read my human design and astrology, it's meant for this. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So it's this, I'm not some amazing person that's, doing better than the sheep, because the sheep, if I read their astrological start, it might say things that they are blah, 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 blah. Now, this is where we get in there and you find places for amazement. So my husband's not as esoteric as me, obviously, or even at all. And that reads so in his chart, but it does say there's spots for amazingness. Like he's an amazing leader. He's an amazing strength. So you still can find places of amazement, but some of us are more built to be more esoterically aware. they might not be able to be as aware as us. So we got to leave them where they are and let them have their own journey. That's all we can do with that, and try to tell our truth. And that those that have ears, let them hear. That's what it means. Those that have the ears that are capable of hearing, listen in. Now, if you see yourself as one of those people, as I do, then your ears, tune them in and try to find what it's actually saying. And I do find the stuff with Jesus that has that quote with it is more expansible, because there's just some things that unpack and just some things that don't unpack, and this unpacks. So standing alone in your true power is the only way you're going to spiral up, because it's near impossible, and every cult will tell you that it's near impossible to go all the way up together. Even the Masons that some want to paint as evil, everybody that knows them as a lived reality knows that they're just a flop. Like, they're Fred Flintstone. They're not what they used to be. They don't know, like, we possibly know more than the Freemasons of today, and maybe they're burying it from us, and that maybe there is some top people that know a lot. But like, we literally, me and my husband knew someone that was a Freemason, and he was just a normal guy that worked at Ford, and he didn't know anything esoteric. It was just a man group where they went and hung out. So you are the one that needs to see yourself as the spiritual authority. Are you ready to move forward? Are you ready to learn more? Are you ready to open yourself up and take on that cognitive dissonance, which will cause you pain? It might even have karmic backlash, because as you try to unblock your blocks to continue up your spiral and learn more and more and more and more, you are going to find, and I'm missing my toy I had yesterday where I pulled out that thing, which I was perfect. Do you know where that toy is that goes like this? Well, because that's actually what we are. Like, the spiral is a nice way to look at it, and that's one dimension of it. But our actual matrix is shown in, like, the matrix, the platonic solids. Like, we are moving out in a sphere. This is where flat earthers lose me, and I'm open to the idea, but everything of existence is a sphere. That's just the way things roll. Now, that black sun I see inside the earth is a black hole, and that's just how magnetism and everything flows, and our actual energy pulls it down into itself. It's a whole big concept to build ourselves into. But when we expand ourselves, you see it and you start to live it more, but you have to live through your blocks. And from the beginning, they start like literally more embarrassingly petty little things that are just like, ugh, but they wear off. And next thing you know, you're having bigger things, like the whole end of the earth, which was yesterday. And it's like, but it's still a block. It's still something I need to work through, like, need to be okay. And you'll find that there's things pumped into us, like about the safety of your family. Oh, you can't possibly believe this stuff. You're going to open yourself up to demons, and they're going to, like, because this will happen. Darkness will flood in as you open up your chambers, because you are that prism. You are those locks and those mechanisms constantly opening, but with rust and with screws, because things have been done to us. Like the matrix, everything's a matrix, but they're different layers. We each are our own matrix on the earth. So this is why when we change our frequency, it's for a multitude of reasons, that our vibrations change, but our matrix overlayer of the earth changes, which is literally gridding it nicer if you're nicer. And when the more you remove your blocks, the more somebody else's matrix can open easier, because you've added that to the collective consciousness. So when they hit that block, it's going to be easier for them. And this is one of the main reasons it's easier for us, because of all the people that have done it before us, like starting with people like Jesus. That's why you only hear about one Jesus. But yet in the early 1900s, we have Manly P. Hall, we have Carl Jung, we have Rudolf Steiner, and that's just three of them. There was way more. That even Freud himself could have been a bigger voice for this movement, and he had some great ideas. But he was even quoted as saying, when his daughter died, and my own mother was said to say the same thing about God, like that, well, if God exists, God's a butthole, like, basically, like, so they kind of cut themselves and separated themselves on purpose because they got really mad. But then you're limiting anytime you see a block, like, oh, I just can't do this. It's okay to understand that something might not be for you. If you, like me in gardening, like, I tried it. I don't really even enjoy it. I don't really want to do it. But let's say I super loved gardening, but I was allowing my fear of dirt. It's terrible, but I'm making my fear of dirt stop me from gardening. That's a block stopping me from my expansion, because it's a block and I'm not getting through it. Or I could sit and meditate on why I'm afraid of dirt. and have it be a childhood memory, or it could even be a past life thing, in which case you'll just need to find it and release it. But trust me, this is the kind of thing that meditation does on its own. It's going to do it for you. You don't really need to worry about like finding the exact thoughts. It does help when you do, like certain, or even when you have epiphanies can release blocks. Like just have, like this morning, that's what happened with releasing the yesterday darkness, because I even woke up feeling heavy, and I obviously was going through some cosmic energy push, and like I slept way longer, I woke up heavier, it was some massive thing, but I went through it as one would go through anything, with confidence, with knowing that it hurt, but it's okay that it hurts. So I could go garden the next day after meditating on it, knowing that I might be scared of the dirt, but I'm going to garden anyways. But it's also a game where you have to honor yourself. And let's say I'm gardening, but I'm starting to shake, and I'm starting to get hives because I'm so scared of the dirt. Okay, we're going to back off again. We're going to go meditate some more. And we're going to keep working on this. We're going to start researching the history of dirt. And this is getting really silly. I'm sorry, that's a terrible example. But this is the kind of things, when we find a block, we're going to come at it from every angle. We'll research dirt. We'll find out what it is. We'll find its molecules and see, there's nothing to be scared of there. And like, we'll just keep going through all these different things. And you can do this with all your fears. And death is ultimately, if you take, I think David Hawking says this, if you take any fear and say, and why am I afraid of that? 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 And we take it all the way to its end conclusion. It's because I'm going to die. It's because I'm going to die. Like even when we're scared of loss of love, loss of person, that's our loss of society, are getting shunned, and then boop, we're dead. Because that's just how things worked. We used to die all the time, very, 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 very easily. Like I love that movie, 1,000 Ways to Die in the West, or 1,000,000 Ways to Die in the West, because it's hilariously true. We used to die so easily, but that's not the case anymore. And we can finally, that'll be a block for probably every single one of us. That's going to be really root chakra-y. And again, when we're looking at things from the chakras, all those blocks are in the chakras, and your chakras are actually those reality generators. They are the things that hold within them all the dimensions. So that's another thing that'll expand you as you learn about each outer chakra. You will learn more. They're just like our astrology, how we would have used to only been living from the 3 first chakras. And as we move up, we deal with more and expand more and more and more as those blocks come and go. Okay. Oh, let's pull the screen back up for you to see. 76, Jesus said the Father's kingdom is like a merchant who had a supply of merchandise and found a pearl. That merchant was prudent. He sold the merchandise and bought the single pearl for himself. So also with you, seek his treasure that is unfailing, that is enduring, which no moth comes to eat and no worm destroys. Yeah, so that's like out of everything that you can have, you just want the best thing. So this is when we're learning, we only want the best thing. So still, it's like he knew we were going to be talking specifically, because I noticed yesterday as I choked through everything, it was getting worse and worse and worse. And the Gospel of Thomas started great. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. But as we've been going through this journey, it started to get like, well, that didn't mean anything. Well, that just seemed dumb. But okay, sweetie. Yeah. These are the kind of things that you deal with. Yes, of course she needs to be grabbing from above my head. Okay. Oh, I should check if she's jiggling the camera, let me know, people. That's our one rule. Okay, so we want to find the pearl in all the information we're learning. We want to find that teacher that's going to juice us. Like when I found through learning and going through all these different teachers, like there's certain people, like I don't want to poo on him because he was great at a certain point, like Lee Harris, I really loved. And I still think he's a great person. So that's why I'm going to name him, because there's other teachers I learned from that I no longer see as great people. And I was like, okay. But he's one of those teachers where I still think he's a beautiful soul, but I find that he constantly talks about the same stuff. It's around the same areas. It's very early entry empath. If you're sad, this is how to be a little bit stronger. But honestly, when you're like so thirsty, like we talked about earlier, at that well dries up. So for me, Lee Harris dried up as a well of information, and that's okay. I would have done myself a disservice if I had to stay but I love Lee as a person, which I still do. I should stay with him and learn from him because I feel comfortable with him. And you know what I mean? Like how you can grow these relationships with YouTubers, especially because you you literally can talk to them and they answer back, or you just feel personalized, because whatever it may be. Because as one, you see, this is like a family. When you're here listening to me, I want to be like, we're together. This is how this psychic link works. But if it's dried up as a well, I'm not offended if you want to move on, because I personally understand there's so much information out there that we are beginning to all tie together, that you would do yourself a disservice if learning about how the dimensions tie together in balance of Christ consciousness, if that wears off and you're like, okay, and somehow there's a next layer that I'm not at yet, and you're like, bam, I want that one. Like, you've learned how to get to the 8th chakra and you're 8th chakra dealing now, but good luck. And I hope to learn from you one day. That's amazing. Or it could be something even off to the side. Like I found with when I was learning healing, I would learn esoteric things and get forward and forward and forward, but I would get really jammed up with my healing. I used to. That does wear off. You actually get to a point where you flow through something in just one night, you know? So but then you get stuck on those healings. And Carl Jung, that's where you always fly back to Carl Jung and his approach with dealing with shadow aspects, because the way he tells you that the shadow is calling for attention. The shadow is calling for attention and integration, because it is where the blocks are. It's where the negative programming is, and it's where our natural astrological shadow issues will go. And it will also hold within it beautiful light, because certain things, like especially things like singing and dancing or having fun, like kids used to be in my day taught to be seen and not heard, and that will cause you to bury in with you your artistic, loving, singing self, like you're going to get in trouble. And even in outside adult life, this is one of the things I would love to be like, I am way more childlike at home than out in public, because obviously there's a certain standard in public, and this is one of my, I would guess, blocks, because I don't want to be seen as crazy. I'm a mother and I don't want them to be like, you know, but that's still a block. I would love to be, I'm still pretty hyperactive in public though, just so I'm still pushing the boundaries, but I would love to even push it more. Like one of my dreams of how I see the world working, which other people might find so silly, is I would love a real life musical. I would love for us all to be like how they had, that was a fad 10, 15 years ago, maybe, I don't know, where they did the group dances in America and they would all break out dancing and film. That is wonderful. But imagine if we actually had like such aligned collective consciousness that like it wouldn't need to be pre-planned. We're not going and practicing, but we could actually, just like you flow in a conversation, we could flow in a song, which her and I do even sometimes, like we'll sing it around together. Like that is a beautiful, magical idea of a future to see and manifest and create in our own divine centered alignment, because we need to stay centered, but with always that image of the future, of not getting lost in the image, but at the same time holding it in your energetic being so that you're pumping it and projecting it out into the ether as you move along in your balance. Because the most important place is the present, but you need to know what the future is for you. So back to yesterday, like getting all like, oh God, is the world is something, it doesn't matter, because that's not my future. And that's all I can hold. I know the truth of the outside. We don't want to ever ignore the truth. You have to see it, but then step through it. And you don't even know, you don't even need to know how you're going to step through it. And I haven't proven this yet with the world, but I've proven it with personal issues and just when big things come up, all the bureaucracy we deal with in this world. But instead of getting stressed out about it, just know that it will be taken care of, and it is. And that's the kind of thing where it just is, like warranty issues. Someone posted the other day about having to deal with the warranty gods, and that's a real truth. That is a real lived truth of our reality. Like we used to die by getting eaten by bears, but now we're fighting warranty people because you bought a vacuum. This is my version. You bought a vacuum and it broke 2 months later, and they're not going to help you because it's 2 months and you have to call the actual manufacturer, but the actual manufacturer, blah, 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 blah. Those are terrible, awful situations, but there are now lived stresses of like, but that we work our way through and we see the hope, and we can use our balanced alignment to help those things go better for us. And the same thing in projection of our entire future, as with these mini moments of warranties. Okay, next we have, and we'll probably wrap this up soon because it's been an hour, but let's do one more maybe. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. 77, Jesus said, I am the light that is over all things. I am all. From me all came forth, and to me all attained. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. Now that's the all. I love this. So this is, I'm glad we ended with some serious depth here. Thank you, Jesus, because that is the all. So he's saying, he says, I am, like the I am, the all that is that's the all. When people want to, and this is like one of the things that could keep you an atheist, like it did me, like, who's God? How could God possibly be God? And then you learn the Hermetics and you're like, oh, God's the all. And then it's like, duh, of course God's the all. That's the only way it would exist. Of course God is neither male nor female. Of course. The only thing you could possibly fight about is which came first, although female, but you could fight about that. That makes sense if you wanted to fight about that, sure, because there's evidence to cause fighting. But the fact that the God is all, it actually doesn't make any other sense, because what would we be in if God's not all? Now, does that mean the God that created this specific earth is the all? No. But should we worship that being? Never, because we are divine, the all God. It doesn't matter what other thing came, just like how we tinker with animals today. I have one left, glowfish, we have glowfish, and they are genetically engineered to glow. They're not naturally supposed to glow. They mix them with jellyfish. And then there's fish with arms. They're man-made, that you see at the pet stores. So that's just simple, tiny examples of how we're already manipulating stuff. And then what we've done to the corn and the wheat and the soy, that's genetically modified. There's tons of genetically modified things now. That is still of and with the all that is God. We are not, it's God. We might be, it's sweetie, we're jiggling the camera. 1 second. So we are its creator as humans, not me specifically, but the scientists, and then humanity as the whole would get the check mark as the creator of that when we're talking dimensional layers. But technically, we are not God. You can be the creator and not be the God, because the creator is just the scientist. They're the creator. Should we be grateful? Sure. Thanks for creating us. But they are not God. And we should never throw our worship away to anything. But we do want to be alignment with that space. And that's what that Christ consciousness space is that divine alignment that takes you right through duality. Because yes, physical reality and a lot of the dimensions work off that polarity. But when we shoot with the Christ consciousness straight up into the all, we're going with a straight line, because you can go Luciferian and all light, but you'll max out. When Jesus talks about going through the gates, it's like the eye of a needle. It's because it is, but the gates isn't in earth. It's actually at the top of our dimensional layers of when the polarities end. So if you want to achieve past those dimensions, which is further than fourth and fifth, sweetie, the camera's jiggling. Okay, go check on your brothers. If you want to go to the park, you'll go check on your brothers. Thank you. No jiggling the camera. What's the rule? Okay, so we're in the dimensions and we're at the very, very, very tippy top. And we have the negative and the positive polarities. We can only get through if we are with neither and we are fully balanced. But it's going to feel positive because God, the all, is positive, where the Luciferian light, actually this side, is too light. That's too far on the other side, and you won't get through if we're talking full alignment. But we have a big story to get through before we're actually leaving this entire realm. And if you asked your soul, I doubt it even wants to leave. But we stay lined up with Christ consciousness because it keeps us with that balance of the self, of that higher realm, of that definite place we want to go, because otherwise we're getting thrown into chaos, unbalance, whatever other side that we choose, where when we stick together, that's just going to hold you in that. Let's think about it. How's the spiral going to spin around correctly? Like the top, this is probably why the Jewish people had their dreidels.
I'm gonna go now. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So the dreidel that spins on its top surface, around and around and around and around and around it goes. And that center is what we want to hold. The tornado that's around us, the energy body and the torus field, which naturally pulls in. Like we naturally want to be in balanced coherence. We always want that. I'm going to pull up my image, my favorite image I love to show you all. And let's go ahead and present that to you, because this image could not be shown enough and you cannot see this enough. It's exactly what you are. And that Christ-centeredness is right down the middle, your spine. That's where you want to hold it. And this is an image of one going properly. And when we throw it out of balance is when you would start to see glitches and havoc actually happening within your energy body. Like if you were in other dimensions, you could see this as a lived reality. And this is the kind of things that energy healers would feel into and see to see, oh, you have a problem. Like let's just use the example of what we're literally seeing. Oh, I see a problem in the red zone. I see a problem in the blue zone. And they would go in and heal that in that specific way. And actually color healing is a real phenomenon that you can use. So you would have to be one of those people that feel into actual energy healing to be able to heal the different areas. And your blocks and your damages when you're going at healing are basically the same thing that you want to find. So we're going to wrap up and end this now here. If anyone has any last minute questions, go ahead and ask. Otherwise, thank you very much for being here today on Transcending Ascension as we go through our Gospel of Thomas and authentically learn the concepts of metaphysics and enlightenment and how that they can balance out the self to enhance our life, to enhance our growth, to heal our pain, and to bring us all together forward into a brighter future. This is how it's done right here in the healing and the learning and the expanding. So thank you for watching Transcending Ascension. Goodbye for now.